Hi all, and welcome to my video regarding force feedback. I've been wanting to create this for a little while now because force feedback is such a hot topic within the sim racing community these days, and so many sims seem to accentuate, and it is required much more than ever before. There was back in the day when people used to run without force feedback, but as you see here, I've got a shot of my external camera from iRacing. And iRacing is probably one of the prime examples of requiring force feedback. Now, first things to say regarding force feedback, from a personal level, I don't like it. Which is a bit strange for me to say considering I'm creating this video, but I don't like it. I think it gives a very false interpretation of what force feedback is. Force feedback in a real life road car does not really exist. A lot of the forces that are generated through a steering wheel within sim racing don't really exist. They're not actually there. They all are generated through the chassis, through the car, and through the seat. Seat your pants stuff, this. So it actually comes through all the seats, and you feel it through the seat and basically through your bum. That's where you're feeling all these forces. But obviously in sim racing, unless you have some crazy setup, then you're very unlikely to feel those forces, so they're generated through the steering wheel. Which is all very well good and said, because you feel like things like understeer and oversteer, and they're a lot more manageable and a lot more catchable. So that's what prompted this video. What I've done is I've taken 5 simulators, 5 of the best simulators I think are out there currently, and I've steered. I'll admit now, I've steered away from things like Project Cars, because I don't think Project Cars is, in my opinion, a true simulator. So I have gone for iRacing. I have gone for Assetto Corsa, I have gone for RaceRoom Experience, GameStop Car Extreme, and also rFactor 2. So they're the 5 that I've decided to evaluate, and I've gone into quite a lot of detail and depth of them. As you see, I'm just showing you some off-board shots here. When I get into it properly, when I evaluate each one, we'll go on to onboards. But yeah, I decided to evaluate them and see what I could take away from them, and try and match up my settings across each sim to be as similar as possible to get the best possible reading for me personally. Because I think if you can do that, well, you give yourself a better shot of understanding how the force feedback works within the sim. Also, I've opted for different cars, sometimes due to restrictions, but also due to something maybe I might be driving at the time. Prime example, Skip Barber on iRacing at the moment has got to be one of the most fun cars I've ever driven, and the racing is just fantastic as well. So you can't complain at that at all. So yeah, this is what I've decided to do. This is looking at all aspects of force feedback. I'm not going to look at the sim itself too much, because the sims itself I'd like to go on to different videos and maybe create some different videos regarding the simulators themselves. This is just directly force feedback. What it feels like, how it influences the car, what the experiences are like, and how that actually translates to an overall experience, but also actual race experience. iRacing, for an example, and a few other of these sims that you'll see have their own independent series that they have created, possibly even for cash prizes. But then there are other sims out there that are predominantly for league racing, and a lot of league racing are now is very close wheel-to-wheel racing. And if you really want to take it forwards in looking at how good that is, and how good the actual force feedback within these modern simulators actually is. So as you see here, I've just got all these external cameras at the moment, which has been a lot of fun to actually record some of these. This is it's one of my last videos actually created, which is my rFactor 2 lap, which I'm gonna throw a little bit of promotion out here, if you like. But the car you see here is the GT-AM car within the Virtual Endurance Championship mod. Which, guys, if you want to have some fun with rFactor 2, honestly, at this point in time in history, it's the only place to go and race. This series is superb. It is fantastic, the way it is run, the way it has been developed, the way the cars are, the way the mod is. It is sublime. As a league racing, as a championship, I could not recommend this series more. It's a lot of fun, and you guys will not be disappointed if you head over there and do some racing, because it is just wonderful to race at. Alright, well, we're coming up to the point now where I think I will evaluate. Here we go, my onboard lap on iRacing within this Skip Barber. Now I've lasted around about 5 minutes for each individual sim. So as you see here, this is iRacing and Skip Barber, and this was at the Summit Point Raceway. Now interestingly, this is actually the first time I've ever driven Summit Point, so it actually took quite a long time to learn and understand it. The Skip Barber car itself is actually quite a difficult one in itself to learn and understand. There's a common theme that in iRacing, if you know this car and learn this car, you can generally speaking drive anything within iRacing. Don't think that's strictly true, because there's a lot more adaptability with a lot of other cars, but I think this is a very good baseline to work off, and it is great fun in race competition as well. So looking at the force feedback, now the force feedback within iRacing, I've done a lot of research and I've done a lot of things with the force feedback, and iRacing itself and its force feedback are Marmite. They are pure Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. Initially with iRacing, I went beyond that and I despised it. I did not like iRacing one iota. I just did not get on with this sim at all. It's only really this year, 2015, that I've come back to it, learned it and developed from it, and tried to understand iRacing a lot more depth and detail. From that, the settings within iRacing are they're fairly standard. I'll be honest, they're fairly standard settings, so it's quite easy to actually understand how everything works, to set it up, to produce, and to get some sort of good generic feeling with the car, a baseline feeling with the car. You can then do certain things to tweak it, such as your centering forces, the centering springs, and also your external settings within for example, I'm on G27, so your external settings there, and then the actual overall strength of the force feedback. Now for me, the strength of the force feedback in this sim is actually what I think is its strong point. It has a tremendous sense of grip and weight of the car. You feel like there's a lot of weight to the car, and you can really like throw it about. You can dive in deep on the brakes, and you can really sort of feel the front of that car. Now a lot of people say that it actually has a dead feeling. I disagree. I don't think that's a dead feeling whatsoever. Because I've tried to make the force feedback as light as possible, to me, the simulator is then doing everything else. I personally like that, because then you essentially get a nice balance. So for me, iRacing works very, very well in that sense, because you can like this just here, braking as deep as I possibly could at the time. In fact, I think in a few laps I go even deeper than that. But I was able to turn, I was able to get on the power, and I could feel when the tyres firstly locked, but then also when the understeer kicked in. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to make the force feedback as light as possible, because I don't actually like to run a lot of it anyway, to make it as light as possible, but still create the feel and the grip. I was able to achieve that in iRacing. It was probably the easiest sim to actually get that feeling with. And I don't know if that because it's a physics thing, or because the tracks are laser scanned, but there is definitely something within iRacing that has this lovely central pull, and when you get that strike that balance between what you want with the force feedback and what the sim can actually do, then I think it starts to open up a bit. One problem with iRacing that I have found is it's very easy to go the other way. iRacing has a very high potential to feel dead, and that is one big problem with iRacing, because I think the actual area of getting the force feedback is quite small. Now that might sound like a contradiction from where I was before, but it's quite a small area, but once you're in that area it feels huge. And I think iRacing have done that in a very interesting sense, but if you even are a little bit outside of that, or don't have maybe your centering forces and then your force feedback set right, it feels dead. It just feels essentially like you're turning a dead weight. I remember recording myself. My girlfriend recorded a video for me, but over my right shoulder, where I had two different settings enabled on iRacing and the force feedback settings. And when I watched them back, I couldn't believe how much wheel work was going into one than the other, but and how much the lap time difference was. And I was only talking 2 to 3 clicks here, and it really, really surprised me. So for iRacing, I do love it. I think it's great fun, and I do recommend it to everyone because it is a great, great sim. and really would recommend it to many people to really understand how a car works, the feel, the grip, the way it moves, just that general sort of buzz that you get from a simulator. I think iRacing does offer it. In my opinion, iRacing does indeed offer it. And once you have that area, you're going to enjoy it. Okay, we move on now to Assetto Corsa. Assetto Corsa essentially is another one where I did not particularly like it when it first came out. I was not a big fan of it at all. I thought it had way too much grip for what it was. And arguably still even now, it does still feel a little bit like that. It feels like it does have a bit too much grip. But here, I'm in the newly released Renault 3.5 car. And David Dominguez, Edward Malorki, if you watch this, you have created a beautiful mod. Not to mention, this sim looks bloody fantastic. Look at some of these graphics here. They look... I'm by no stretch of imagination do I have a good graphics card. But that, to me, just looks sublime. It looks beautiful. And you know, these guys have created a great car and a mod. The physics of this and how the force feedback then works is quite interesting. It took a little bit of tweaking and understanding how Assetto Corsa works, but I tried to emulate what I had with an iRacing into Assetto Corsa, and surprisingly enough, it was actually quite easy to do. Once I understood what was required, it was actually quite easy to taper and actually get something quite good. The one thing I like about Assetto Corsa, slightly more than iRacing, you feel oversteer more. I like that. I like the fact with Assetto Corsa you feel slip. You feel the slip angle through the wheel. So if you've oversteered, the weight of the wheel will want to kick it back. And I like that. I think that's a very subtle thing that they've implemented, but a very key thing at the same time. As you can see here, there's a lot of wheel work on here for myself, and that's because I'm actually feeling the rear and what it's doing. The front of this car maybe still has a little bit too much front downforce. Maybe not front downforce, but front grip. But I like the way that the rear moves. I like the way that the slip angles work within Assetto Corsa. And to actually record this video that you're seeing here, I took tremendous pleasure in it. It was such a fun thing to do to record this and to do these laps in this car. Assetto Corsa for me has come on leaps and bounds, and it's a sim that I did not think would actually get going, because when it first came out, extreme skeptical. I think it's got still problems in other areas, but I'll come on to that into a different video. The force feedback effect though, and what it does and how it feels, it's got that weight, but it's also got that delicate lightness where you feel the subtleties of the track. So you feel that point of understeer, you feel that point of oversteer, and to get that sort of lightness in the wheel that I particularly like, then it is quite an easy thing to achieve. And to go through the actual menus within Assetto Corsa, it's very simple. It's a very simple system. It's a very easy thing to learn and understand. It's a very simple thing to go and Google as well. If you're ever struggling with the force feedback settings across any wheel, to actually go and learn and understand how it works, it's very easy to do. And the settings don't throw you all over the place, which is really quite nice. And also, I think for a newer driver that's coming into sim racing, Assetto Corsa would be something I would point them towards at this point in time, because it is good. It's getting better and better, and it's well, you can see that. Sorry, I just noticed that myself. I'm very quite a lot of understeer there, but I really felt that in the wheel. I really did feel a lot of that through the wheel. Now, being on a G27, obviously it's not the most ultimate in terms of force feedback and feel. There are better wheels out there. I know that. You guys all know that, I expect as well. But nevertheless, even for the G27, which is arguably now a lower end wheel, it works very, very well. To the extent that when you feel like the tyres are starting to go off, you can actually feel that sort of lightening of grip. The grip starts to push, and you feel the understeer starting to kick in. So you have to adapt your driving style to it. And I love that. I think that is what a simulator should be. And it is, because of that, it's made Assetto Corsa into a simulator that I would happily go and drive. If you give me this about 6 months ago, and I would have done this 6 months ago, I would have said no, not a chance. I wouldn't have done it. Simple as that. I would not have done it. I did not like this sim at all. But now, That is spot on. Okay, we move on now. We're moving on to RaceRoom Experience. RaceRoom Experience. Okay. We're on board here. This is me in a saline around the Portimao circuit in Portugal. For me, this was the biggest nightmare in trying to set up. This sim was an absolute nightmare in trying to actually find force feedback that worked. The reason being, simply, there's too many settings. There is that many settings that do different things and have different tweaks to them. It just feels rubbish. And I'll be honest with you, even at the point of recording this video and what you're seeing now, I'm not actually happy with the force feedback on this. And I've worked, the RaceRoom Experience is the one that I've worked with the most to try and find the force feedback. And I don't like it. I have to say, the force feedback within RaceRoom Experience has been my biggest disappointment. I heard a lot of great things about it, and a lot of people were surprised by it. To me, it's not that great. The slip angles are quite nice at high speeds. The low speed feels very dead. It feels very heavy, very lethargic. That's a word I'm looking for. Very lethargic. This corner here, honestly, at that point, there's nothing in the wheel. Nothing actually happens. There's no reaction. This corner here, I'm in second gear here, but later on I take it in third, and you can slightly more so feel the slip. High speed corner here, which is lift and then re-accelerate. There's nothing. It feels dead on the wheel. Now, I have tried to find settings that work, and quite honestly, I can't find anything. And I've taken some of the top drivers, what they've posted, and tried to put their force feedback settings on. And to me, they're not that good. They're pretty poor in terms of what you feel and what I think works, and what should work, and how a car should feel, or at least simulated in how it should feel. And I only have the base version of RaceRoom, and quite honestly, even within this saline, it's an interesting driving experience. I can't say it's a very pleasurable one though. It was probably one that I least enjoyed. I feel like I'm being very highly critical on RaceRoom here, but I'm being brutally honest at the same time. RaceRoom for me just it lacks something, and I think the problem potentially with RaceRoom is it's still a little bit too much on the arcade side. I think it's probably closer to being a sim than it ever has been before, but I think there's too many slight little niggles within the arcade side that come through, and for me personally, I think it detracts from it. The other big thing is it truly is a nightmare to set up. There's 2 pages worth of force feedback settings. 2 pages worth of settings. That's crazy to me. It is truly crazy to me in the fact that there's 2 pages worth of settings in itself. I mean, that was just horrendous to go through and try and set anything up. Every time I went on track, I'd do about 4 corners and then go back and change something, because I knew how it fell straight away. And it was not very appealing at all. These laps that I'm doing now, you've just seen those previous 2 corners. I went slightly off. Well, all of a sudden, the car just gripped up on the front, but I had no sense of it. And then, turning in here, it's like the force feedback would only kick in when the wheel had been turned about 10%. So, trying to find that initial apex line where you look at the apex and try and dive for it, I was having to guess more so, or really work off my eyes rather than touch and feel, which I guess in sim racing you have to do anyway, admittedly, but I don't know, it lacks something. There's something that it just lacks, and I know there's a lot of competitions within RaceRoom Experience at the moment, and I know there's a couple of Touring Pro Series, for example, they've gone across to it. I do understand why, but I don't think they've picked the right sim, and in time will tell. Development will happen, and I'm sure things will improve. But in terms of a feel and to attract drivers, I just think they've gone the wrong way with this one. At this point in time, I think it's got a lot of potential there, because there are some nice settings within there you can genuinely feel the forces with, but the forces that generated through the wheel and how it would generally feel to actually go out and race continuously, say over a race distance, for me personally, I wouldn't recommend this one at all, because it's a very dull feeling. It's quite a docile. Nothing really happens to it, other maybe a bit of oversteer. And yeah, it's a little bit disappointing for me. I was a bit disappointed by RaceRoom. I tried my hardest with it. I tried to keep going with it, but eventually it got to the point where it's just a bit like, no, this just isn't working for me anymore. And I kind of thought, well, if it's not working, I need to find something else. And sure enough, as you see now, I did. GameStop Car Extreme, and I'm on the beta version here as well. I invested in their crowdfunding, and I'm so pleased I did. This is the Formula Extreme car, which is essentially the 2014, I believe, Formula 1 car, around the beautiful A1 ring in Austria, or sorry, the Red Bull ring, I should say, sorry, Red Bull ring in Austria. And I was lucky enough to actually go to the Formula 1 there this year, so that's why I've opted for it. Now, let me just start by saying, you know, essentially this is rFactor 1 on steroids. That's what this sim is, but it's so much more as well, because it's everything rFactor 1 should be, and it's everything that rFactor 2 currently is not. And that's in terms of the sim itself. The force feedback on this, it has that very sort of dated feeling within it from rFactor 1, but then it's also got all those very good positive bits that were added externally to rFactor 1, implemented already within the sim. And that for me has made GameStop Car absolutely brilliant. It is one of the most fun sims you'll ever likely drive, and the feel of some of these cars. I'm in this car at the moment, the Formula 1 2014, the Formula Extreme. I've driven every other car within this, and not one of them has disappointed. Not one. They have done a stupendous job with this sim. They must have just extracted everything they possibly can from G Motor and P Motor too, to actually create what is a bloody fantastic simulator. Unfortunately, what I find is it doesn't really have the exposure or the fans behind it yet. But believe me, it will come, because this is great. This is a lot of fun to drive. The one thing that I particularly like about it that differs from rFactor 1 is the feel. The forces that are generated through the wheel, you feel a lot more understeer and oversteer with this car and this sim. So you actually feel the slip. You feel it actually doing something. rFactor 1 was too easy. It was point and squirt. You very rarely felt any change. Your time would go off. You'd see your time disappear. But the actual feel on the wheel, no, you wouldn't really feel a lot. This, you feel every corner. Every corner you feel, and it is fantastic to drive. My downfall is exactly what's going to happen here. That, for me, is too long in getting on the power. But the low-end forces are not there. The low-end forces that are generated within GameStop Car are not there. I don't like how the low-end forces are very low. Well, no, they're not. You don't really feel anything. But then come up to this corner. As you can see, that took a long time to get on the throttle, but it's because I carried too much speed. Same again here. But I can feel it. You could feel that through the wheel. With GameStop Car, also, I have to say, is that it is the easiest one of them all to set up. It's literally one slider bar, one drop down setting, and that's it, you're done. Because of it, obviously makes it very simplistic, and I think that's why you lose some of those centrifugal forces at the low end setting. But you get the balance between what the strength is and the percentage of that strength, then I think it will work. But as you'll see again here. Okay. That didn't quite work how I was wanting it to. I forgot that video cut there at that point. My apologies. Alright, never mind. I'll move on to what is regarded across the community as the best force feedback on the market at the moment, rFactor 2. I'm going to give it a few corners before I say anything more on that. I gave it a few more corners, the reason being, I agree. It's bloody fantastic. The force feedback in this sim is phenomenal. It is so good. You feel every slight part of the track. You feel entry, you feel exit, you feel mid-corner, you feel the curb. You feel low speed, you feel high speed. It is unbelievably good, and my god, the power of the force feedback, even on a G27, is mind-blowing. It is great, great fun to actually feel a car move and understand what it's doing. It is so, so fun. My problem with rFactor 2, well, you're looking at it. Literally that. It's crap to look at. And to be honest with you, I'll go into in more detail in another video, but that's my problem with it. And there's a few other things I don't like about it as well. But the feel and the way the car feels, what you take from the force feedback, is tremendous. The way this rFactor 2 is set up in terms of the actual steering and how you generate the force feedback, similar-ish, I would say, to Assetto Corsa and iRacing. It's on those sorts of levels. You kind of have to get into a certain window. Once you're in that window, fantastic. Outside of it, it feels a bit pants. It feels very heavy, very dull. You get some negative forces. You get accentuated curbs that don't really exist. You get curb heights that you think are about 10 foot tall when they're actually about 2 centimeters. Yeah, so it's very easy to get these settings wrong as well. But once you're within the correct window to taper it and fine-tune it to what you want, it's outstanding. It really is great and very, very fun to drive. I'm not going to say much more on it because, quite honestly, guys, you want to have some fun with force feedback and you want to feel a car and you want to go and have some fun with it, I cannot recommend rFactor 2 more. But there are reasons why I would not put it at number 1. So just on that basis, what would I then review as being my favourite? Well, the problem with that is that you've got to interpret what your simulator is and what you want to do. There are so many simulators out there now. We have market saturation. There's so much that can be done and so much that can be driven that it really is getting to the point where you have to cross-platform or stick to one, commit to one, and then that be it. Well, I don't think that's for everyone sometimes, and it's not for everyone. So for me personally, I really do enjoy iRacing, Assetto Corsa, and rFactor 2. But for pure fun factor, GameStop car, that is just unbelievable fun. So it's very much a personal choice. If you're new to sim racing, you're watching this, and you're thinking what to buy for the first time, honestly, the one, I'd say all of them except RaceRoom Experience. RaceRoom Experience, I think it's too much detail. There's too much for a new driver out there. These other ones, if you want some fun and create the feel and to understand how force feedback works, all of them have their own merits. The only thing I will say is that rFactor 2 simulates low-end forces better than any other sim. It truly does. And if you want the entire package of feel and racing and how a car will move, even at a very low setting like I have it, I recommend rFactor 2. Beyond that, I think you are looking at an iRacing or a Assetto Corsa. But other than that, I don't think there's anything better out there in terms of feel and touch and what you can do with a car, and in terms of ease of use of how to set it up and what you want to do with it. Once you have that within any of these sims, they are brilliant. All of them have their own merit and are brilliant, and I do thoroughly enjoy them. And quite honestly, the force feedback, as I started this video, to me doesn't truly exist. It doesn't exist. It's not actually there. But if you want something that does sort of exist and is sort of there in the background and creates that feel for you where you want to really drive it and drive it hard and you want to keep on driving it, then rFactor 2 probably is the way forward. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been something like I said, I've wanted to do for a little while now. I hope you have enjoyed it. It's something different for me. I don't usually make YouTube videos, so let me know if it's worth doing again. I'm usually a commentator or a driver, so this is a new one for me, and I'm pleased I've done it. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Thanks very much.